welcome to CMA Next Stop, which is a series that we have recently launched. I'm Pooja Inamdar, Director of Events for CMA New York Chapter. With me, I have Yamil Kasas, Director of Operations for New York Chapter. And this is a New York and global event combined that we have put together for you all. 3 years back, when I moved to United States, I thought I'd be working in animation production because that's what I do. But when I started looking for jobs and figured that animation production is not totally a different ballgame, but a bit different than what I had imagined. And this was when the seed was implanted in my head that maybe it's not just animation production, but different kinds of children's media content are produced differently or approached differently in different continents. I wondered if it was the same with other stuff. And when I put it across to the VP of programming, Karen, Susie, and Terry, they had wondered about it too. And that's how we thought of putting this together for you all. So CMA Next Stop is a series that would connect us with fellow creators, colleagues, and people working across children's media industry, but from different continents. Essentially what CMA does as an organization, but has been doing only in the continent of North America. Now we are planning to take it ahead and bring to you fellow creators across all other continents. First in the series would be animation production in India and North America. I'm excited to introduce you all to 2 Emmy-nominated producers with over a decade of experience in creating animated children's content. One, as I like to say it, one is from the East and the other one is from the West. I'd like to introduce you first to Vaibhav Kumaresh, who is my senior from Animation Design School. Vaibhav is an international Emmy-nominated animation filmmaker and founder and director of Vaibhav Studios. Founded in 2003, the studio has created some of India's favorite animated content in the field of TV commercials, episodic series, and channel promos. Most loved ones being Vodafone Zoomies, Simpu the Angry Sardar Math Teacher on Channel V, and Lumput, the globally acclaimed international Emmy-nominated microshort series for Cartoon Network. The studio is currently working on its maiden Hindi feature film titled Return of the Jungle, which again is an animation film. A fine arts graduate, Vaibhav studied animation film design at National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. He's an active member and honorary secretary of the Animation Society of India. Vaibhav also teaches animation and is a visiting faculty at various animation and design schools. All of you or some of you must have known Jennifer, as she has been the president of CMA New York chapter and is happy to contribute to the CMA community. Jennifer is a twice Emmy-nominated creative director, producer, and content maker. Currently a supervising producer at Nick Jr. with over 13 years of experience on the team. She's developed over a dozen of short-form franchises for Noggin, Nick Jr.'s learning service, including the recently Emmy-nominated mindfulness series, Imagination Trips. Prior to launching Noggin and developing its production team, she led the launch of Nick Jr.'s YouTube channel, overseeing short-form franchises like Junior Gamers and Hide and Seek. Additionally, she has created and produced several projects as co-founder of Squirrel Friends, a children's media collective, including What's Inside, a stop-motion interstitial series for TVO kids, and Mo's Bo's, a short documentary, which has screened in over 30 festivals around the world, including its world premiere at TIFF Kids. Jennifer recollects that her first CMA event was a bingo night all the way back in 2008. And today she has joined us as a speaker, and I'm happy to have both of them. I'd also like Yamil to show us reels of both of them so we get acquainted with their work, and maybe we can take this ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the first one we're going to be showing off is Jen's reel that she has graciously provided for us. Let me share my screen for everybody to see.
And off we go.
Did you remember to put on sunscreen?
Let's hit the beach, gotta have some fun. Before we go, let's put some sunscreen on.
Yup. Let's watch. Thanks for digging in with me.
Incredible amounts of variety on that one. And the very next one is Vaibhav. I'm going to show yours as well.
Boys!
मंदार भाई कैसे हो?
Incredible. Love that one too.
I can't, as an animation producer, I can't wait to dig into the questions I have, and we can take more questions towards the end. My first question being to both of you is, why animation? How did you end up in this field?
Jennifer, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I studied film and animation in college, and in college at the Rochester Institute of Technology, I focused mostly on live action film production. But upon graduating college and looking for a job, I realized that some of the things I really loved about my student work and the stories I remembered the most growing up and the kind of things I liked were in animation. So after job searching and joining the CMA to help with that job search, I landed at Nick and never looked back. I love telling great stories, no matter what the medium, but I think that animation in particular is so flexible and just really exciting because you can do so many things with it and tell so many different types of stories in a really limitless way.
My case, I think very similar to Jennifer. I think the common link is the storytelling. We grew up on stories, and there was this urge to tell stories. I used to draw a lot. In my school, in all my school diaries, I would make a lot of drawings. I would make my own stories into comics. So I had no clue that I was going to get into animation, because we were not exposed to too much of animation growing up. So I after my 10th grade, I studied fine arts, where I got more inputs into various mediums, whether it was sculpture, printmaking. But the storytelling bug was the common link, and that's when I got to know that there's a place that you can learn how to make animation films. So that's how my post-graduation was into animation. That's when I got introduced to animation. And then it was so much fun. Storytelling using all the mediums, whether it's performing arts or visual arts. So your acting, your dance, your music, sound, your drawings, and there's this art form where you can choose whether it needs to be hand-drawn, whether it needs to be puppets, whether it needs to be digital 3D. So regardless of what the tools are, you figure out interesting ways to tell your story, and collaborating with so many people. So it was a lot of fun. So I got to know of it in stages, and then it stuck on.
My second question being, can you take us through the animation production process in your respective countries with the help of one of your projects? We would like to see maybe behind the scenes, or any short scribbles you have, or anything that you would like to show us. So maybe we can start with Jen first.
Sure. Pooja, do you want to share a little bit from Imagination Trips? Or do you want me to pull it up and then I can pull up the behind the scenes if we want to watch maybe like the first like 20 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so to preface this, Imagination Trips is the first little segment you saw in my reel. It's a mindfulness series developed for Noggin. It's short form, and we made several episodes. This was developed in March 2020 and April 2020 as a response to the pandemic. So when we talk about schedule in a moment, we moved very quickly because we wanted to create something that would help kids and parents while they were stuck in their homes and while there was so much uncertainty about what's happening. So with the help of our curriculum advisors and our whole team, we moved as fast as possible to make this content and put it out there and to just make sure that as many kids and families could get access to it as possible. So again, mindfulness, and this particular episode has Blue from Blue's Clues and You.
Welcome to Imagination Trips. Get ready to take a trip to a far-off place right now. Don't worry, you'll be back in a minute. To get there, close your eyes and take one deep breath in and one deep breath out. And off we go. Can you guess where we traveled to?
Okay, so that was Imagination Trips. They're short segments that might be a child's first introduction to mindfulness. And in each episode, you go to a different place, and we're coaching kids on how to do this, how to take a deep breath in, how to take a deep breath out, closing their eyes. And some of the notes we got back from, our curriculum advisor and team is like being really explicit about the VO and those instructions, and when to close your eyes and when to open your eyes. We did some testing. Not, it's during the pandemic, so it wasn't exactly the same type of testing that we would have done pre-pandemic, but, producers shared this around with their children. And, we might have done some over Zoom kind of testing with children as well. I don't know if we're doing it at that point, but one of the things that immediately came back on early rounds were kids were just keeping their eyes shut, or before the VO was adjusted, they didn't know to close their eyes. So again, we had to rework the script just to make sure it was really clear for our young audience, and that they knew what to be doing during these times, and just also giving them little cues about what to be listening for, what to be doing, and slowing down. I'm gonna try sharing my screen again. We'll see how this goes, but this is what a typical script looks like. Can people see that? Great.
Yes,
okay.
Looks good.
Awesome. So for short form, our scripts are usually 2-column scripts with a video side and an audio side. You can see some highlights I had in this old version where I was noting script changes about closing your eyes, or can you guess where we traveled to? Okay, open your eyes, things like that, like I just mentioned. We also, because this is a franchise and we wanted to use very similar openings and closings, we tried to time out, how long would an intro be? How long would different segments be? Like the moment we were breathing, and then further on in the animation, you change location in the ocean. So we were trying to figure out about how long they would be as we were dealing, with remote work and all of that. So the intros were all recycled with the tops, with the Imagination Trips, with the balloon and everything, and same with the outro. And in the middle is where everything kind of varied. So that's that. And if folks are interested, I can share an early design. It might take me a while to pull it up, so I'm going to leave it at that in the interest of time. But one of the things that I'll quickly say is that in the beginning, you see this animation now with the balloon floating through space. If you think about the VO, that opening can be anything, and early versions of it actually had early designs. We were brainstorming, what do you see? What could this be? And we pictured maybe silhouettes of people walking through a busy train station or something to kind of symbolize the busyness of your mind, or the busyness of the scene you might be trying to slow down from. And then we realized that visual just didn't quite work with kids. And we wanted something more dreamy that kind of implied you're being taken away and drifting off to a more relaxing place. So, iterations, like all media. But yeah, that's Imagination Trips.
So with you, Vaibhav, how is the process, especially with Lumput, which doesn't have a script?
Right. So what I'll also do is I'll try and share my screen, and I'll probably take you through some storyboards, very very rough ones. So I'm just going to pull it out very quickly. With Lamput, like you mentioned, it's a non-dialogue show. I'll just share screen. Let me know if you can see these. These are extremely rough doodles from our sketchbook.
Yes,
Okay.
we can see them.
Yes.
So there is a very, very rough text-based script, but beyond that, it's all visual development. These are all sketchbook. This is like a finished still from the show. But I wanted to share these extremely bad-looking doodles, but they are so critical to storytelling because the artist is clarifying so many of their doubts on paper. For example, there was this doctor that was a little fat and he goes on a diet so that he's able to catch Lamput. So the decision was initially he'll be like this triangle. He's a bulky guy. And after he diets, we just invert the triangle and he becomes like a tough guy and he's able to catch Lamput. So very, very small decisions like take place on the paper. These are important decisions where the story beats are being written. And so many doodles. I'll just keep going through these. There are again story notes, timing related notes, like this is 30 seconds for the intro, 30 for the laser, 30 for the invisible section. And all the gags, all the visual gags are being tested out on paper. You can see the doodles keep getting simpler and simpler, or you can say dirtier or dirtier, and you can't, maybe only the artist who drew it knows what he or she is trying to figure out in the scene. Then there are certain doodles that are a little more detailed where artists will make it, they will explore other stuff. This is one scene where Lamput goes to the art gallery. So how he interacts with various, art pieces in the museum. So all that is exploration. This is the Escher's gallery with illusions. So a lot of homework that we did on the MC Escher style of how we could use that in our story. So all these are bad drawings, but so precious to storytelling. These are about the layout. If there is a certain place or a situation where the action is taking place and where do we stage the action. This is one of the finished backgrounds. At the core of it, it is all these rough doodles. Again, I'm just mixing it up with some finished background art. So that this is how it started off as a seed of an idea and this is what it became on screen. So again, various storytelling explorations. So when it's non-dialogue, the performance needs to show through. The storytelling has to be entirely visual. So I'm just going to, run through it very, very, very quickly. It's all doodles. If this is like movement being captured. So this is a fight sequence that takes place on the blades of a ceiling fan. So the artist is scribbling so many different, and this is how it turned out on screen. And these are all drawings for that action sequence. You can see it's like scribbles, but like I said, this is very, very precious. This is the homework that we never see on screen, but that's what makes, there are these 3D models being made just to understand where each character would be. So yeah, so I'll pause it here.
I think I'll like to show a short clip from Lamput, which is a 30-seconder, so that everyone understands what kind of gag or what kind of content is.
Right, because there's no context to these doodles that I'm showing right now. So it'll be nice if we see the show. basically that Lamput is that orange character that escapes, and these guys are trying to catch him. Thanks, Pooja.
Welcome. So my next question is the most sought after, and both of you loved it during the tech rehearsal, which was, while working in a production environment, you also end up working with internal teams like S&P, legal, uh, and or educational consultants. Do these additional layers lengthen the production process? If so, how do you work around it, or how do you work with it as creators?
I'm happy to start with that one. I think that like design and like audio and like animation, it's a huge collaborative process. And I think that these other, other teams are just other, exactly other teammates, other collaborators with you. And in the case of the content we make for preschoolers, very frequently the notes and concerns we get back just strengthen the content and make it more appropriate for our age range, especially if we're working with like a curriculum consultant or, an educational expert. They're making sure that what we're trying to do is actually working. So if we get a note from a team like that, it's something we usually welcome, and we address so that the work can be the best it can. And in terms of like schedule and everything else, just like you to build an appropriate amount of time for design and then appropriate amount of time for script writing and all of those other things, we build in the time for these reviews, and so that every team can have the appropriate amount of time to review the content, give their notes, and that then we can respond and revise again with the proper amount of time.
So
On your end, how is it?
yes, so our first tryst with S&P was when we started on Lamput, because primarily we would, we produce a lot of TV commercials and channel idents, but we were not heavily into creating content or episodic work. So in the last 8 years, that's when we started creating a lot of episodic content for, kids television. So with kids television, there are these responsibilities. Yes, you do try push yourself. One side of you pushes yourself to tell exciting stories and have fun, but the way it manifests on screen, there are certain rules. And we learned that when Lamput was first telecast in the Asia Pacific region, because these rules are very culture specific. So when it began airing in Europe and Middle East, there were a different set of rules that S&P would share with us, and we would understand that yes, we need to think from different points of view, because our audience is finally going to consume it. And if there are certain cultural imagery or certain contexts that don't play out correctly, it's very important as storytellers for us to absorb that and put that in it and still have fun. So there's always different ways, or there are loopholes we can get around it and concentrate on the fun part of it without having images that could be misinterpreted. So that's been a good learning. So S&P, although you want to have fun, it's a good responsible way of doing it. And there are, we figured out ways. The bottom line is you still have to have fun, and it's very easy to do that. So again, when we used to get comments from the US S&P, Europe S&P, Asia Pacific, so all these would give us a lot of different, we used to learn a lot, because there were different things they were picking on. So our vocabulary, or our understanding also grows.
Taking ahead to what Jen said, where animation is a teamwork, my next question, I'd like to go on to how essentially before the pandemic, everybody would come together in a studio and work on a film, be it a short form content or long form content, and only none of the producers knew working from home, or none of the animators knew working from home. It was a team effort from one place. So how has pandemic affected the production process? Vaibhav, this question is especially for you, because in India, when next it was announced that there is a lockdown from tomorrow onwards, and it was hard to get out. How was it working around this, and how was content still was being produced. Like Jen said, Imagination Trips was produced at the peak of pandemic. So how did you navigate through this transition?
So yes, I think it hit us hard. It hit everybody hard. The first wave, and when the lockdowns were announced, it was quite sudden. So yes, for 3 months we were, sweeping the floors, washing the utensils, and it was a different world. We were all doing different roles at home, and it was fun in a very different way. And then once those 3 months passed and we were missing work so desperately, we are setting up different ways to work from home. Thankfully, in our case, because I would say again thanks to Lumput, because that was an episodic show, we had a lot of work in hand, and as a team we had, we were in probably season 3. So there was a lot of experience of having done this virtually, coordinating with multiple teams in different parts of the globe as well at times. So it went pretty smooth. The first wave was surprisingly pretty smooth, and by the second wave we were all pros at it. We managed. Artists they got time to come back, take some of their stuff home, like the hardware. The networking issues were sorted. And we figured ways to virtually, I'm sure all of us figured out our own ways to virtually collaborate and still ensure that we have fun at work. But I would say that when you physically meet up, there are so many things. For example, stop motion. How do you do that virtually? It is challenging, and I'm sure many of us have figured out solo techniques even in stop motion. But the energy that comes by just brainstorming together, and it's time saving. So there's no equivalent to that. I have learned that. But now the plus point is, even though we all meet physically and work, there are many of us who are still continuing to work virtually, and at times that is more efficient. So it's a good mix. We've had an experience, so we're trying to keep what works well for us, and we know what did not work for us. So we've been there, done that. So we're probably wiser. All of us are wiser now.
Jen, how was it with you, especially working with animators, where there are loads of lot of videos that need to be rendered, and how did you go through and working with different kinds of media, and in a company like Nickelodeon? How did they figure it out?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest learning curves we had early on. I think like our teams, we had a sense like something was coming, and that week that New York shut down, we were having a lot of internal meetings and telling people to pack up hard drives and like be ready. And Paramount sent out an email saying, oh, we'll do a test work from home day that Friday, bring everything you'll need. And then we never went back. So we were prepared in some ways, in that we had all our computers, we had hard drives. Animators were definitely talking about what kind of machines they'd have at home or not. I think for us, one of the biggest learning curves was rendering times, and just building in way longer render times for animation early on. We also were impacted by what voiceover artists had at home studios or not early on. A lot more people have the capability to record remotely now than they did in March 2020. So like a lot of my records now are all virtual over Source Connect or something like that. And a lot of it was like back then, like we had to find talent that could record remotely. And for certain voices that we'd use normally, like show talent or something like that, where you need a specific person, in some cases we would like ship them, microphones or materials to make sure it could happen. And that would again have to like be something you planned out and found that equipment and build in that time for your schedule to do that. Though these days, like things are moving much smoother. Totally agree that hybrid work can be really wonderful for work-life balance, and also like allow you to, get into the office for, targeted meetings and brainstorms and things like that, and to see your colleagues. I agree that stop motion is not something done really well remotely. I would also say that like remote shoots over Zoom or sending somebody a camera and hoping to get something back, glad that we're moving away from that. Directing children over Zoom was very difficult, but we did it. And we learned a lot, and I'm really proud of that work no matter what. But those are some things I'm happy to leave behind and take some of the better learnings with us as we move into this new model of work.
That's so inspiring to hear from both of you. Like, especially directing children in itself is very tough. And when you're doing it on Zoom, I can not imagine how hard can it be. So I see a question in the chat, and that's what my next question is on, which is, how is the pitching process? Nick recently has launched the Content Accelerator program, which, being a giant company, I'm sure you're aware of it. And so it also has a pitch portal where you can send submissions to, and I'm sure there's someone who goes through them, and I'm not sure if they can you talk a bit about that? Whereas Vaibhav, how is it in India? How is the pitching process? How did you get to pitch Lumput to Cartoon Network? Is there a portal, or how different it is?
I can talk a little about the Nick Content Accelerator, and I'm going to put the link in the chat for everybody. I am not working on this project, so I can share the information I have, which is a lot of what's online and publicly available, but they're taking pitches until September 30th, and it's designed specifically for early career underrepresented creatives. There's going to be 3 categories: live action, big kid animation, and then preschool. And there's like a lot of great guidelines discussing what each of those categories includes, a PDF of more information, and kind of an outline of like what happens once you submit. So I'll pop that into the chat. If for whatever reason you're not ready for September 30th, because that is like 2 weeks away, Nickelodeon very frequently has calls for pitches. So I think, if you want to submit, totally go for it. But if you don't feel ready, don't feel like, oh no, this is my one chance. I would set up like a Google alert or something for like Nickelodeon pitches, because they frequently will have them, if not every year of some sort, every other year. And sometimes they're looking for animated shorts. Sometimes it's more expansive, like this Content Accelerator. But my point is, like, this is not your only opportunity. So I'm going to pop that into the chat for everybody. And if you submit, I'm wishing you lots and lots of luck.
Our case, like I'll share an example of Lumput, because that was one show that we pitched at the very nascent stage. So before that, I just want to add that, this show was born out of joblessness. Like, when you're between projects, when you're doing certain commercials, it's so hectic that, in a week you slog and, you finish something. And then you have a couple of days, it's like a vacuum where you don't have any work. So that is the time when you're falling back on your wish list, on, as a studio, as individual directors, what is the kind of work that you wish to do? And at one such stage, I was missing doing something with shape morph, morphing shapes and telling stories with that. So at that kind of we cooked up like a little story. So this is a very, very initial pitch deck. Is it visible? Go on.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, Lumput is this gooey orange nutcase that has escaped from the asylum, and there are these 2 medical cops who are trying to get him. But the problem is, they can never get to him. Why? Because he's a master of disguise. Even if he's there, you won't figure that he's there. So every time these guys, they catch him or they get to him, Lumput will innovate a new way to escape, right under their noses. Then these were some of the stories, like very, very short stories. What happens at the pawn shop, what happened at the manhole, and then what happened on Orange Street. So these are like very, very, these 6 or 7 images is all that we had pitched. And so that was a very small pitch of just sharing an idea in as exciting way as you can. So Cartoon Network in the Asia Pacific region was very excited, and they said, okay, let's try out a pilot to see if this idea looks very good. So we created a series of those 15 seconders. So Pooja, what you had played earlier was from one of those earliest Lumput clips that we had created, and that became season 1 eventually. So they commissioned 6 15-second shots, micro shots. They called it micro shots. So those were that was the pilot for Lumput. So this is how a seed of an idea began. So I would say, whatever way, if as a creator, if you're excited with something, capture that excitement in whichever form you can. So if these 6 doodles or 6 pages or 6 images told that story or conveyed certain images which were fun, at least it got someone else excited, with that same excitement that you had. If you are able to transfer that, if the pitch can contain that, then that's the ideal pitch.
I'd like to add here, like that was an excellent example to what even Jen sent that link. And the link itself suggests that the pitch deck should be only 5 pages. And that was an excellent example of what 5 to 7 pages can be. Like as creators, when you look at that, how to pitch, and you think 5 pages, what am I going to convey in 5 pages? But that's it. I think that was it. My last question to both of you, and this is because I can see a lot of questions, so I have skipped a few and I'd like to take the audience's questions. My last question is, like, you two have taken different paths in your careers. Vaibhav, at the very beginning, you started off as an independent animator, founder of your own studio, and grew it to where it is now, like be it like taking pitches to like different entertainment channels in India, or taking up work as it comes. Jen, on the other hand, yours is a very different path from that of Vaibhav's, where you have worked with the giant like Nickelodeon exactly for the same amount of years, like over a decade. So how was it different for both of you? What was easy? What was hard?
I think one thing that we at Nick Jr. always challenge ourselves to do is to keep things fresh, especially when working for the same brand and some of the same characters for a long time. And your assignment might be like a premiere week of a show that's been on for a long time. How do you make it still feel exciting? And how can you make sure that whatever you're doing that's exciting feels also exciting to kids and kids appropriate? Like, we can't just go off and make content that feels like it's more at home at Big Nick or like Adult Swim. So we have to, really still be thinking about our 2 to 6 audience, but also still finding new inspiration and new ways to tell short stories, whether they're 5-second, IDs, or if they're like 2 or 3 minute long interstitials. And those also hit at very different price points and budgets. Sometimes you'll be given a really healthy budget, and other times you might be given a smaller budget and still asked to deliver against that. And I think that a lot of it is coming up with really creative ways to tell stories within those limitations, no matter what you're faced with. So yeah.
Pooja, in my case, I think the challenging moments for me was probably quitting my job. My first job, 5 years of working in an animation studio. It was a lot of fun, no doubt. But I had this desire to tell our own stories or longer stories. So it was an overnight decision to quit and start on our own. So it was the most challenging one. And I think that was the start of it. So I think the core of it is that if you want to do something very desperately, you will figure out ways to do that. There's a child in each one of us, so that child having fun for me is most important. So even when our colleagues are there are so many directors. Sometimes I have a certain vision, sometimes they have such a beautiful vision. So as a colleague, or as I would say a co-child, it is very important for us to realize each other's visions, and also make way for it. Their vision, we need to figure out collectively how that story becomes practical. How do we reach that story to various audiences? And every story would have its unique audience. So to find that niche and to position that content there, just make that content happen itself is a challenge. Many times you need to fund it yourself, till people see that vision. So all these are challenging moments. And as you read out in the beginning, the feature film, like as a small studio, we are a group of 17, like 17 people. So that core team is now producing a feature length film for the local audience. So that, for me personally, is the greatest challenge. I want to see how local content, which shows our everyday contemporary culture, I'm very keen to see whether it will go global, because there's a lot of talk about local and global and glocal, so all these terms. But storytelling, I feel, especially in the last 2 years with OTT, with us being exposed to content from every culture, the language does not matter at all. In fact, when the culture is unique, it is even more refreshing for us as audiences to see and experience new stories. So with that hope, we want to tell stories which are very close to our culture that we've grown up with, so that it is unique. And we hope that, globally, various cultures will still love it, or will accept it. So those are the various stages of challenges we are going through.
Thanks, Vaibhav and Jennifer. I see a lot of questions. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted, but some of them are really good. So I'm going to start from the last one, which is for Vaibhav. In this age of cultural diversity, are you considering pitching any series to Cartoon Network that introduce animated Indian characters? And I'd like to add to it, animated Indian characters essentially sometimes people think are come from mythology. So what is your take on that as well?
Yes, like if you say pitching, we have actually produced an entire feature film that is very inspired from our childhood. So that will, like I mentioned, it is extremely local, and that's what we know. That's what we love sharing and putting in our work. So to answer that question, yes, we are working on content which is extremely local, which will have Indian contemporary characters. Mythology is something we've all grown up on, but it's very important to retell those stories. That's the beauty of mythology. Every storyteller has the unique quality to tell that story their own unique way. So that is something we need to continue doing. Otherwise we'll all get stuck in a story formula. So we need to trust our own, if it excites us, because for me, I am the first audience. So especially if I'm giving it to children, if I'm not happy with it, or if I'm not kicked about it, I should not be giving it to them. And over the years, like we touched upon SNP, that is a certain responsibility that, it gets ingrained in our blood, in our thinking, that yes, there is a certain responsibility and we don't cross that line. So as responsible storytellers, we will take a call, so we trust ourselves to do that. So if we are not excited, we should not present that to our audience. So with that feeling, we are trying to build this feature film. So yes, we are working on that. So it's not just mythology, but it's contemporary everyday world that we see around us. And mythology, whether we like it or not, is within us. So it's bound to show in our stories, but it'll show in a unique way, in the way that the storyteller intends. I hope that answered the question.
Yes. Jen, I have this one question for you, which is, as independent producers, what is your advice when you have pitch meetings set up with major distributors, studios, or small outfits like YouTube Kids, Pocket Watch, and others? And maybe you can talk a bit about Nickelodeon brand, so that people who want to pitch the brand voice, so people who want to pitch through the content accelerator program can pitch.
Yeah, I'm seeing the second part of this question too. I'll say first off the bat that I don't feel well equipped to talk about co-production opportunities with a polished pilot. I think it's a great question, but that's not my area of expertise. I do think though that very much like when you're applying to a normal job and you're taking your cover letter and yourself and your resume and you're thinking about how to tailor it very slightly to each employer, I would do the same thing with your pitch packet. You're not changing your overall creative, but really think about who you're talking to and how their brand voice differs. Like we can all like kind of say what the difference is between Nick, PBS, cartoon, Disney, and think about, what their brand voice is, what characters might pop for them, or how to position it just slightly different. And again, I'm not saying completely overhaul your creative, so it's a different thing from one company to another. You want to be true to your story and your pitch, but if there are small tweaks you can make based on references or a way of presenting it that might feel like a better fit and it's targeted versus the same pitch, that could be good. I'd also say just do your homework and kind of try and figure out who you're meeting with. That's not always possible depending upon if it's like a big conference opportunity and all of a sudden, you're assigned a 30-minute slot with so-and-so and it's just kind of off the cuff. But I think like knowing what they've worked on and the kind of shows they produce and the kind of things they think about is always good. So you're able to dive deeper into that conversation and create a connection.
That's great advice. Thank you, Jen. I think we are clocking at 10, and even though I can see many more interesting questions, there are some things that I'd like to talk about as we end this program. First of all, thank you, Jen and Vaibhav. There's so much always to learn from each of you, and I hope that we can take this series ahead and invite more and more speakers. So I take this opportunity to tell others who are attending, like if you're coming from a different country like me and you know someone who knows someone, or who knows someone who's working in a different region, I'd love to hear about them. You can find my contact on CMA website. You can reach out to me anytime, and we try our best to invite them as part of this series. And we want the series to grow. And it could be anything from like legal to like animation production to books, anything and everything related to children's media. Lastly, again, thank you all. I'd also like to hand it over to Yamil, who's going to talk about the future events that CMA is coming up with in our next 3-4 months that are remaining. So Yamil, can you, he's also going to post it. Karen has already posted it in the chat.
Yeah, of course. So just to reiterate what has already been posted in the chat, there is a CMA Connect coming up very soon on September 15th. I believe it's going at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also have a number of events that have to do with media literacy, I believe, coming up in October. We have our first in-person event that has yet to be determined coming up in the 2nd of November from New York City specifically, and a very exciting Red Share announcement for LA coming up on the 3rd of November. So very excited for that to come up. And if there's any information that you guys want to find out, there are links and information posted in the chat as well.
Thank you, Pooja, and the entire team. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll take leave as my dog is distracting, and earlier today she distracted me. So sorry about that, but thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I know it's early morning there, Vaibhav, and late night for New York. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Jen. Bye, Vaibhav.